right, so welcome back to Intro to Coding. We're going to continue on with conditionals. But first, just want to give a shout out. I think when you're coding, it's always good to have some background music. That's what I like. So today, for this video, we're listening to Memorex Memories, and this is the Pictures of Purple Skies album. This guy's great. It's some great coding music, so I recommend it. Yeah, let's go on. So what is a conditional? And this conditionals give us the ability to execute certain code based on whether or not something is true or truthy. So we've talked about data, we talked about variables. Now we're going to start talking about the flow of our app with conditionals, loops, and functions. So conditionals really give us a way to branch our code and do certain parts of our code. There is this concept of truthy in coding, and truthy, we'll see examples of this, but it means a truthy value means it has a value, i.e. it's not zero, nil, or null, or undefined. So it kind of depends on the language, but sometimes things like zero, nil, null, or undefined can have falsy values, and anything else that has a value is considered truthy. So when we're talking about conditionals, we're really talking about Boolean logic, and it's very simple, but also can get very complicated with trying to do stuff with it. But really, Boolean logic has two values. It's true and false. And then we have three operators. I mean, there are technically more, but these are the ones we're going to use like 99.9% of the time. And this is the and, or, and not operators. And in the parentheses, this is what you're going to see them in programming languages. So and is a double ampersand, or is the two pipes, and not is the bang. So this is essentially it. This is what we have with Boolean logic. It's just two values and three operators. So let's look at some just kind of Boolean logic. So let's look at some equations. So if I have this true and false and not false, well, really this true and false, so true and false, that is really false. Not false is true. So this simplifies to false and true, which is false. If we have true or false is going to be true and not. So let's look what's inside of here. True and false, that's false. False or false is false. So this whole thing becomes true. So not true is false. So this becomes true and not true, which is equal to false. Now this might be confusing, but you really intuitively know this. If I were to say, if you're over 6 feet tall and are an alien, raise your hand. You wouldn't raise your hand because you're not an alien. If I said, if you're over 6 feet tall and are human, well, you are human, but are you over 6 feet tall? So we know these conditions. We use them every day. We're actually insanely good and intuitive with conditionals. And what we can do with this is we can combine these with if statements. And once again, if statements are something you know very well. So let's say, for example, if you are awake, say I am awake, drink some water. So if this is true, you're going to do this stuff. It's an if-then statement. If it's not true, then you're not going to do this stuff. So if you are asleep, well, then you're going to ignore these instructions. And this is how they are in code. We have an if condition. So if this condition is true, then run the code here. And then either way, our code is going to continue. So we can think about our code going from top to bottom, and then if it hits this condition, well, it's going to make a choice whether this condition is true or not to run the code inside of here. And in Ruby, we're going to have the if condition, and then it's going to run any code from this if within this end. All right. We also have an if-else statement. So an if-else statement is, once again, we know this. We're going to see if the condition is true, we're going to run the code here. Else, we have this spot, this block of code where we can run it if the condition is false. So with an if-else statement, only one of these sections is going to be run. And then we will do it, and then the code continues. We have an if-else-if statement. Now, I want to make this clear that only one of these is going to run. But we have our if condition. So we'll run the code here if condition is true. Then we can do an else if, and we can throw in another condition. And then we can run condition here if condition is false, if the first condition in the first if statement is false, and this condition 1 is true. And then else, run code here if this first condition is false, and this condition 1 is also false. So no, only one of these get run. And we can have as many else ifs as we want. So this is if you have more than one condition, you can do an else if. There's also a switch command, which I'm going to not talk about right now. We're just going to keep it simple, but we can use a switch command, which essentially does the same thing. It just allows us to handle multiple conditions. All right. And then, yeah, either way, the code's going to continue. So this seems really easy, right? It really should, because you are so good at this. You know how to do these just intuitively in your head. You do these every day. Like, if it's cold outside, put on a jacket. If it's raining, get an umbrella. You know these conditionals really well. Your brain's very good at doing them. But we're going to see this is not easy. We're going to see this can get hard, and it can be a little confusing, and there's a lot of different ways we can do it. So let's just get into a demo with this. So once again, I'm going to use REPL IT for this. You can use VS Code or something else. Now, just to like kind of review on conditionals, notice it says here in this terminal, I can run IRB. Now, if you don't know, IRB is interactive Ruby. So I can come in here and get a Ruby command line in here, and I can just start typing in some little Boolean equations. So true or false, that is true. Now rules, I can also use parentheses. So I could say something like not true and false. So parentheses, just like in math, it's going to evaluate what's in the parentheses first. So true and false. Well, something is true, but then the second thing is false. This is going to be false, but then I'm going to negate that. So that becomes false. This thing is false, but then we negate it, and that becomes true. So you can come in here and practice these things. So true or true, and false. So true or true is true, and false, that would be false. Oh, sorry, no, sorry. What's going on here is, since I don't have it in parentheses, it doesn't, if we say true or true and false, it's actually, the computer's actually just going to see this true statement, and then it's going to see this or. Well, something is true and then I have an or. It doesn't really matter what this is. If it's false, this is still going to be true. So yeah, that's true. But if I were to put the parentheses, this is where I messed up. I was kind of thinking I was doing it like this. If I were to put the parentheses, true or true becomes true, and then and false. Then that becomes false. So the parentheses does matter, if that's what you want. So, and if I'm in this IRB shell, so I can just get out of here by typing exit. And Control L to clear that console. So let's just look at the syntax really quick. Let's just do if 3 is greater than 2, else end. So here we could say puts yes it is, no, it is not. I mean, this is a silly equation. We kind of know that 3 is greater than 2, but we can just kind of see this run. Yes, it is. And then, I just want to also kind of demonstrate. Let's just have our code continues. So our code is going to run. We're just going with this. We're still just going from top to bottom. So it's kind of nice to see this execution happen. So we run that. So we get our starting, then we hit our conditional, we decide which block to run, and then we can say, yes, it is. So let's do an else if in Ruby. So else if in Ruby, it's actually spelled else if without the E. It kind of, I think that's a little bad style in my mind. I think they're trying to shorthand it. It's one word or one letter, but that's kind of how Ruby is. Ruby likes to make things very simplified. So I just want to show this. So let's run this. I throw in an else if. I also need an else here. Let's finish this. So notice how this if statement is true and also this else if statement is true. This line here is not, this is not going to get run because this first one is true. So it's going to see this first true condition, it's going to run the code, and then it's going to stop checking here. Now if we do one that's not true, so we'll say 1 is greater than 2, that is not true. Now this is going to run. So there we go. So that's the important thing with the if else if statement. Only one of these is going to run, and that's going to be the first one that hits. Like I said, I can have many of these in here. Let's make this one false. I can also just put in conditions here, false. I mean, really, all of these conditions are going to evaluate to true or false. I mean, you're not going to code it like this, but you see this one run. Oop. Let's do something different here. Yo. So we can see that run. See, this is false, that's true. We run that. That's all we run. Okay. So yeah, this is pretty straightforward, but let's make this get a little complicated because it seems simple, but we can get a little hard. So let's say we have some number here. And we'll put that in a variable. Or let's do this. Let's say we have a, so yeah, let's just do a number. And so I'm going to say if, let's first check if number is even. And there's an even method in Ruby. Else end. We're going to put number is even. Then else we're going to put number is odd. Pretty simple here, so, and of course right when I say that it breaks. No method even. Oh yes, I need a question mark. So just a little something for Ruby. If a function ends with a question mark, this tells us it returns a Boolean. So I know this even method, since it has a question mark at the end, is going to return true or false. It's going to be a nice little readability thing. So obviously number 1 is odd. If we make that 2, that's even. So let's say we want to say if our number's odd or even, which we're doing, but we also want to say if it is greater than 5 or not. So this is where we need a nested if statement. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to say if number is even, see if it is greater than 5. If it is odd, see if it is greater than 7. And this is where we could use a nested if statement. So if the number's even, now I want to check if the number is greater than 5. We can just do this as an if statement. And likewise, if it's odd, so I'm going to want to check this in that else statement. If the number is greater than 7, we could say it's greater than 7. So number even, but it's not putting that it's greater than 5 because my number's 2. So let's make this number 8. So it should say, so something that's good with if statements too when you're learning to code is you go through this beforehand and you try to be the compiler or like the thing that's looking at the code and you run it in your own head. So is 8 even? Yes it is. So we're going to put number even. Then we're going to check this if statement. Is 8 greater than 5? Yes it is. Then we're going to say number greater than 5. So I'm expecting to get this log, and then we're going to stop. So let's run that. And there we go. So if I make this 9, once again, is 9 even? Nope. So we're going to skip all of this first part, and we're going to go to the else. So we're going to put numbers odd. Well, is 9 greater than 7? Yes, it is. So then we'll put out number greater than 7. I can't stress how important it is, especially when you're learning, to run through the code in your head and try to guess what's going on. It's really going to make you really solidify these concepts and make you better at reading code. So there we go. There's another example of that, of a nested loop. So let's kind of go into another example. This one, let's think about we're in traffic and we're just about to pass an intersection, and we want to know if we can drive through this light. So I'm going to have a variable called light color. And this is going to be red, yellow, or green. For now, let's just start it off to red. And I'll put a comment. This can be red, yellow, or green. Now, and then we're also going to have this Boolean, which is going to be looks safe to cross. So if this is true, this is going to say, oh, it looks like we can cross the intersection. If it's false, we shouldn't cross. So this is a Boolean. This could be true, or false. So let's just start out with this one. So let's look at some, kind of think about this. So we can do a if statement. Actually, let me do this. Let me give you all of these, and then I want you to spend some time to think about this on your own. So we're also going to ask the question, are we an ambulance? And this is going to be false. This is going to be true or false. And then also is, this is camel case. I want to do this as snake case. Then we're going to look at we're going to have one more. We're going to have, is it night and no one is around? And this can be true or false. So here's kind of our things we're thinking about. So we're at an intersection and we're kind of taking these things into account. Are we an ambulance? Meaning, is there an emergency going on and we're an ambulance? This one is it's night and no one around. We're going to look at the light color and we're going to look at it safe to cross. Now I want you to think about how you could come up with an if-else statement or nested if-else statements, else-if statements to create a little program to see if you should cross the road or not. And we'll change these values to kind of look at it, but just go ahead and pause the video and take a second to try this out on your own. But I'm going to go ahead and do this right now. So what I'm going to do, and here's the thing with this is there's a lot of different ways to solve this. So, and we'll kind of look at some of these, but here's how I came up with this. I'm going to say if, the first thing I want to check, so I want to check, does it look safe to cross? And you know what? I'm going to do this. I'm going to say if it does not look safe to cross, then I know regardless, I don't care if I'm an ambulance, if the light's green, yellow, or red, if it does not look safe to cross, I want to stop. Okay. Now, if it does look safe to cross, now I can kind of check some other things. So inside of here, the next thing I want to check if, and I'm just going to say, hey, is the light color, is this equal to green? If it looks safe to cross, so I've already kind of checked this one. So here in my else statement, I know it looks safe to cross. So this kind of becomes like an and. So if it looks safe and light color equals green, right here, I can go. So it just keeps on auto completing. I can go. Now I might want to do a else if here. So else if, so now what I want to check, well, let's check if the light color is equal to red. Well, if the color is equal, so I know it's safe to cross and the light color is red. Well, let's do another check here within this else if. I want to see, am I in the ambulance? Or, is it night and no one around? Let me move this over. So this is kind of a, if it's safe to cross and the light color is red and I'm an ambulance or it's night and no one around, let's just go ahead and go. And then we have this other else. Now this is the case if the light's yellow. And this would need some other logic that we don't really have. Like how far am I? Is it, how close am I to the intersection, et cetera, how fast am I going? So light is yellow, don't know. So we can kind of see this. This is just one way, one order. We have an if and an else. Our main if else is we're first checking to see if it looks safe to cross. If it does, then we stop. Else, if it's safe to cross, then we check our colors. Is the light green? Well, then we can go. Is our light red? Well, if our light's red, let's check to see if we're an ambulance or it's nighttime and no one's around. Then we can go. I should actually, I forgot this. I need an else. We need right here, we should stop. Right? Because if our light color is red, and if this is false or this is false, we should probably just stop. So we're at a red light. If we're not an ambulance or it's not night, we should just stop so we don't get a ticket. And then here, down here, it's yellow. So this is what I mean by you can do this in your head, like how to cross an intersection, and there's a lot more going on than just these factors. You know how to cross it, but coding it becomes hard. It becomes really hard. I mean, coding something like crossing an intersection is probably impossible because there's so many edge cases. And actually with self-driving cars, they're not doing if-else statements. They're doing machine learning, which is kind of having the computer kind of figure it out on its own. So, yeah, there's that. I'll probably in another video do some more examples of some more complicated logic, but go ahead and really look at this flow, try to do your own flows. Like I said, this is not the only way I could have written this out with these variables, but go around and experiment with this. And what we would also probably want to do with this is throw in some kind of loop to kind of continuously be checking some of these things. And that's what we're going to talk about next is loops. Like how do we repeat this logic? This just goes from the top to the bottom and then it's done. But we probably want to check this as we're driving to make sure things aren't changing. So we'll talk about loops when we get back.